When modern readers open the opening chapters of Genesis, they often bring a specific set of expectations to the text. They interrogate it for material origins, looking for explanations of deep space, planetary accretion, and the physics of molten rock cooling into a habitable sphere. Ancient Near Eastern authors ignored material physics entirely. They focused strictly on functional order. To the original audience, describing how the matter of the universe was manufactured was irrelevant compared to explaining how that matter was organized to function. Genesis chapters 1 through 3 operate as an architectural blueprint. This schematic establishes the structural logic for the biblical canon. It maps out a defined physical environment, a localized cosmic sanctuary, and a highly specific human vocation within that space. Mastering the operational parameters set in this Genesis blueprint is a prerequisite for understanding the climax of the New Testament. The end of the biblical narratives only makes sense if you understand how the system was engineered to work in the beginning. The first phase of this Genesis blueprint details the deliberate preparation of a suitable physical environment. God is building a specific habitation. This shows the separation of chaos into order, light from dark, and water from dry ground, constructing a habitable zone. Later philosophy assumes our ultimate goal is escaping the physical body into spiritual eternity. The biblical text presents the exact opposite trajectory. The physical land is engineered as a specific, gracious gift. It is designed for human enjoyment, and crucially, it is built to be the exact location of divine habitation. God engineered the physical earth as the permanent stage for his interaction with humanity. The climax of this functional creation narrative arrives when humanity is placed directly into this prepared environment. Modern theology often reduces the phrase image of God to a description of human intellect, moral capacity, or basic personhood. In its ancient Near Eastern context, the image of God is a specific, authoritative vocational title. Ancient sovereign kings routinely erected physical statues of themselves at the extreme borders of their territories. Because the king could not be physically present everywhere, these images served as visible, localized representatives of his invisible rule. Humanity was designed to act as God's vice-regents. They are living statues, placed in the world to rule the physical earth on his behalf. Their operational task is clearly defined. They are to multiply and systematically extend God's sovereign borders and glory outward, across the rest of the uncultivated earth. The garden served as a launchpad for humanity's proactive, administrative expansion of God's kingdom. God placed these newly minted vice-regents in a specific geographic epicenter, the Garden of Eden. This top-down architectural schematic shows that Eden is an agricultural garden and simultaneously a cosmic sanctuary designed for God's direct presence. Genesis 2:15 commands Adam to work and keep the garden. The original Hebrew verbs used here are abad and shamar. This split-screen comparison shows these exact Hebrew words appearing later in the text, in places like Numbers chapter 3 and Ezekiel 44. In those later contexts, abad and shamar are used exclusively to describe the duties of priests maintaining the tabernacle. Adam carries a dual identity. He is a royal vice-regent, and he serves as the first priest maintaining the first temple. The architectural layout of the Edenic geography perfectly maps onto the design of the later Israelite tabernacle. Both structures feature an eastward-facing entrance, both employ cherubim as guardians of the inner sanctum, and the tree of life in the center of Eden corresponds directly to the menorah located inside the temple. Eden was engineered as the localized epicenter of God's presence. The intention was for his priest kings to expand the sanctuary zone outward until it covered the entire earth. Maintaining this cosmic sanctuary required strict adherence to a specific operating condition, the covenant. The covenantal framework is straightforward. God provides the land and his direct presence, and in return, he requires unqualified obedience to his parameters. The specific test of this obedience is the prohibition against eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 3 documents a total system rupture. Humanity actively rejects their mandate as vice-regents representing God's rule. They choose to become autonomous rulers. This choice fractures the divine architectural system they were meant to uphold. This rebellion introduces an antagonist, the serpent. This entity intentionally sabotages the expansion of God's glory within the sanctuary. This diagram shows the immediate spatial consequence of the covenant breach. Humanity is forced into exile. The text relies on strict temple imagery to describe this event. Cherubim and a flaming sword are deployed to lock the eastward gate, identical to the guards positioned at the entrance of a sanctuary. The fall halts the expansion of the cosmic temple and drives the priests out of the divine presence. The rest of the biblical canon is dominated by a recurring macrostructural cycle: sin, exile, and restoration. From Genesis 4 onward, the narrative tracks a sustained, mechanical effort by God to resolve this specific Edenic exile and restore the original parameters. The first embedded protocol for this resolution appears in Genesis 3:15. Scholars refer to this verse as the Proto-Evangelium. Proto-Evangelium is a theological term, combining the Greek words for first and gospel, or good news. The verse outlines a specific promise: the seed of the woman will eventually deliver a fatal, crushing blow to the serpent, ending the sabotage. Looking at this canonical timeline, we jump to the final resolution in Revelation 21. God does not scrap his original plan or extract his people to a spiritual heaven. Instead, through Jesus Christ, the ultimate priest, he begins reclaiming the physical creation as a sanctuary. The movement from the first creation to the New Jerusalem follows a direct line of restoration through Christ. His work transforms the physical earth into a sanctuary where God dwells directly with his people once again.